Hello everyone, my name is Nick Iliescu and I work as a senior backend engineer for the secure composition analysis team. Today I would like to demonstrate the last part of a series of demos about continuous advisories ingestion. And in this particular demo, I would like to show you our work on the last component, which is the advisory exporter. Before I begin, let me give a brief introduction of what you're going to see. So as you might know, the intention here is to ingest advisories from a variety of advisory sources and store them into a public GCP bucket. In this case, we started with the GymnasiumDB, but in the future, we are also going to use the TriviDB. So we ingest these advisories. This is a black box for now, but I promised to show more information about this in a minute. We store these in a public bucket in ND.json format. This is a public bucket because it needs to be reached by all the available GitLab instances. So every GitLab instance is going to pull that data and it's going to sync those data with its own Postgres SQL database. Maybe this ND.json format is a bit new for you, so let me talk a bit about it. So until now, we were only supporting this ingestion for licenses, and we were exporting this into a public bucket using CSV format. This is what we called format version V1. Now we introduced a format version V2 where we support ND.json both for licenses and advisories. Right now I'm only gonna focus on the advisories part. So now let's see and let's get more information about how this continuous advisory ingestion happens. So you might remember from my previous demos the first and the second iteration, and this is the last piece, is basically the third iteration. So briefly, in the first iteration, we introduced the advisory feeder. The advisory feeder is triggered based on a schedule every day, once per day. What the advisory feeder does right now is that it clones the GitLab advisory database. It reads from a cursor, which is nothing more than a TXT file stored in a GCP bucket. It reads the last commit that it processed so that it continues from there. It gets all the advisories and it publishes them on a pub sub topic. Then on the second iteration, we saw that we introduced the advisory processor. The advisory processor is responsible for receiving those messages and storing them in the license DB, which is basically a Postgres database which is implemented on the managed service by GCP called Cloud SQL. And now the third iteration is what we introduced, and this is the advisory exporter. The advisory exporter is also triggered by a schedule once per day per environment, and what it does is that it reads the advisories, the new advisories from the license DB Postgres SQL database, and then it exports them and it stores them in a public bucket. It's interesting to mention here that the advisories public bucket is different than the license public bucket. And that being said, I can already show you what we have in production already for this. We just deployed this, so it's quite fresh. So here we are in the deployment project. This is one of the projects that we have, and basically this is the glue where it connects all these services. And what you can see here is that I have an advisory feeder job for dev and prod, and an advisories exporter job for dev and prod respectively. So these are jobs that are scheduled to be executed once per day, and they will run one for dev and one for prod, And in case of the feeder, it will basically send all the data to the PubSub so that the advisory processor can process them, and the exporter will read the data from the database. So here I can already show you that the run feeder ran a couple of hours ago, and the result was basically this part. So it cloned the whole DB repo. Since this was the first time, it was the cursor was empty, so it sent 20,000 advisories. So that was the whole thing, running for the whole thing. It's also interesting to see that this ran quite fast in just almost 2 minutes. Then we also have the exporter, and the exporter, again here it ran, and what it does is that for every registry, so for Maven for instance, it found 5,000 advisories and stored them into this path in the GCP bucket. Then for NPM, again, it found that many advisories and stored them in this path, right? And then maybe what it's also interesting to show you, this is the production project on GCP. As you can see here, I have a license bucket and an advisory bucket. Both of them are public to the internet. So the advisory bucket, you see that we have here a V2 format protocol, format version, and then you can see in here that we have all the directories for all the packet managers that we support. At Maven, you see that we have a file that is of 6.2 megabytes, and it will basically contain the 5,000 advisories that were exported. So this is interesting, but what I would also like to show you is an actual demo of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the feeder and then run the exporter in real time so that you can see the result. And I'm going to run this on my own personal GCP project so that we don't have to worry about the dev and the product environment. So let me start by counting. So on the bottom right corner, I have a connection to the LicenseDB database. So let me first count and see how many rows I have. So I already have some data. I would like to delete all the data from there. So delete from GitLab advisory DB. Yes. Okay. And now if I run this again, you see that we have 0 advisories stored in our database. So we can have we can run these things from a clean state. So now on the top terminal, what I'm basically doing here is that I'm going to run the advisory feeder for my project. So you see that the first log message, it says that it's cloning the GitLab advisory database locally. And basically what it does is that it detected 20,248 advisories, and these advisories are being sent right now and processed by the advisory processor, which you don't see right now. But what I can already do is I can already count the number of advisories, and you already see that these are exactly the same number as this one. Right now, if I go here, and this is my personal GCP project, you see again 2 public buckets, but we are interested for the advisory bucket, so this is clean, so there is nothing there. So now I'm gonna run the exporter for advisories, and maybe this is also interesting. So when we run the exporter, you see that we have 2 different CLI commands, one for licenses and one for advisories. So basically we use the same code base for licenses and advisories. So this is very nice, I think. So now if I run the exporter for the advisories, so basically what it will do is that it's going to fetch all the, in this specific example, I'm running this only for the PyPy packet manager, so I'm not running it for all of them. And basically what it does here is that it fetches from using a cursor all the advisories from the database and sending them to the GCP bucket. So if I go here, let me press refresh and refresh. So you see that suddenly here we have a V2 folder, PyP, and this one, and you see here that we have a file, and if I download this file, you see that I have these advisories, which I know that you cannot really read, but what I can actually do is I can add them here in a file, and you can see that we have 3053 lines. And if I go back here, you will see that we exported 500, 500, 1000, 2000, 3000, 3500. So it should be basically the same number if you add all these things up. So that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.